Blood Moon, the Montana Beast, White Silence, and the First Victim. Montana, the town of Silver Peak. Population 800, surrounded by thick pine forests and impassable mountains. Winter here is merciless. It is 02:15 a.m. Bill, the 60-year-old night guard at the gas station, was half asleep behind the counter. Outside, the blizzard howled. Suddenly, the exterior lights of the station flickered and died. Bill rubbed his eyes and looked out the window. Something dark was moving amidst the white snowdrifts. "Damn coyotes again," Bill grumbled, grabbing the shotgun from the wall. He opened the door and stepped out. The freezing wind pricked his face like needles. "Hey, get out of here," he shouted into the darkness. But instead of a whimper, a strange sound answered him. It was a growl, but not a dog's. The sound seemed to come from underground, from hell itself. Bill's skin crawled. He turned on his flashlight and aimed it toward the sound. The beam of light landed on top of the gas pump canopy. There, perched on a steel beam, sat a massive creature. It was humanoid in shape, but its entire body was covered in thick grey fur, its muscles bulging and its claws gleaming like daggers. The most terrifying part was its face. An elongated wolf muzzle, a mouth dripping with saliva, and crimson eyes staring back with human intelligence, but filled with predatory hatred. Bill didn't have time to raise his rifle. The creature leapt down with blinding speed. Bill only felt a hot, foul breath. Slash! The creature tore out Bill's throat. Blood sprayed onto the snow like a fountain. Bill fell, but he was still alive for a moment. He watched as his red blood was absorbed by the white snow. The creature stepped over him, placed a paw on his chest, and howled at the sky in victory. This was no ordinary animal. It was enjoying the hunt. The hunter from the city. The next afternoon, a black Ford Bronco rolled into town. A tall man in a leather jacket with several days of stubble stepped out. His name was Jackson Jack Crow. By trade, he was a private investigator, but in tight circles, he was known as a cleaner. He was a specialist in paranormal phenomena. The local sheriff, a portly and anxious man named Sheriff Hawkins, greeted him. "Mr. Crow, I'm glad you made it. The situation, it's out of control." "Where's the body?" Jack asked curtly. He didn't like pleasantries. In the morgue, the air was freezing and smelled of decay. Jack examined Bill's remains. The body was mutilated beyond recognition, the internal organs ripped out. "They said it was a bear," the sheriff said, his voice trembling. "But bears don't break locks and smash cameras." Jack leaned into the wound on the neck. "This isn't a bear, Sheriff. Look at the distance between the teeth. The jaw spread is 15 centimeters. This is a wolf, but not a normal wolf." Jack pulled a silver coin from his pocket and touched it to the wound. Upon contact with the blood, the coin hissed and began to turn black. "What is that?" asked the sheriff, eyes wide. "That is your worst nightmare," Jack said seriously. "Declare a curfew in the town. No one goes out at night. We have a werewolf, and it looks like he's not alone." The sheriff wanted to laugh, but seeing the cold look in Jack's eyes, he fell silent. "You're not joking. I don't get paid to joke. Give me the forest map and the camera footage from where Bill was killed. The hunt has begun. Face to face with the forest demon. At night, Jack returned to the crime scene. The old gas station. He took his custom-modified Winchester rifle and 2 revolvers loaded with silver bullets. He sprayed the area with a special scent wolf pheromones to lure the predators. Jack positioned himself in a sniper nest on the roof. The clock struck 3 a.m. The sound of snapping branches came from the forest. Through his binoculars, he saw shadows moving among the trees. There wasn't just one. There were 3. They ran on all 4s, but when they reached the station, they stood up on their hind legs. They were over 2 meters tall. The one in the middle, larger than the others with darker fur, was the alpha. The alpha sniffed the air. He sensed the trap. Grrr! He signaled to his pack. The predators immediately scattered in different directions and vanished from sight. Jack realized they were flanking him. These creatures were not mindless animals. They were strategizing. Suddenly, a creaking sound came from the metal ladder at the back of the roof. Jack spun around, aiming his rifle. Out of the darkness, a massive paw shot up and grabbed the barrel of the gun. The force was so great that Jack couldn't hold on, and the weapon was flung down. The creature leapt onto the roof and lunged at Jack. Jack threw himself to the side with agility and drew his revolver. Bang! The silver bullet hit the creature in the shoulder. The beast roared in agony. Smoke rose from the impact site, and the smell of burning flesh filled the air. The creature staggered back, but didn't fall. Its wound was healing right before Jack's eyes. Damn it! Silver isn't enough for these things, Jack thought. At that moment, the other 2 creatures began climbing onto the roof from below. Jack was surrounded. He pulled a magnesium grenade from his pocket and threw it between the monsters. Eat this, you mutts! Boom! A blinding white light and a shockwave blasted the creatures off the roof. Jack was also thrown into a snowbank below by the impact. His ribs ached terribly, but he was alive. He ran to his car. The engine roared to life. In the rearview mirror, he saw the alpha emerging from the fire. Despite burning, the creature began to chase the car. The forgotten truth. Jack's car sped off the forest road and stopped in front of an old motel on the edge of town. His breathing was heavy. His shirt was stained with blood, and the claw marks on his left shoulder burned like fire. He poured alcohol on the wound and gritted his teeth, enduring the pain. These things aren't dying, he whispered to himself. Silver only slows them down. As dawn broke, Jack headed to the local library, to the archives in the basement. He began digging into the history of Silver Peak. After an hour of searching, he found a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1895. Headline: Miners' Mysterious Deaths, Savages or the Mountain's Curse. The article stated that 100 years ago, miners in this very area had disturbed a sacred Native American burial ground to mine silver. Following this, one of the miners, a tall man named Jonas Black, disappeared inside the mine. When he returned a week later, he had changed. He brutally slaughtered his family and 10 others. He was shot dead, but his body disappeared from the morgue. "Jonas Black," Jack said, looking at the man with cold eyes in the photo. "So, you were the first Alpha, and you are still alive." Just then, the library door opened and Sheriff Hawkins rushed in. His face was pale as a sheet. "Jack, you need to come quickly. They attacked the school." The bloody school. The school building had turned into a scene of carnage and ruin. Police sirens wailed, but no one dared to enter. When Jack arrived, even his blood ran cold at the sight. The walls of the gym were clawed, and the floor was crimson. The predators hadn't touched the children, they had taken them hostage, but the teachers, they had been torn to pieces. "They are playing with us," Jack said, loading his rifle. "They want to instill fear, then kill for pleasure." A scream echoed from the second floor. Jack and the sheriff ran up the stairs. At the end of the corridor, one of the smaller wolves from the previous night, had cornered a young female teacher. Jack didn't hesitate. He had loaded a special explosive-tipped bullet into his rifle chamber. "Hey, ugly!" The creature turned. Boom! The bullet hit the creature's head and detonated. The wolf's skull shattered, spraying brain matter and blood across the wall. This time, it did not get back up. "So they can be killed," Jack said, kicking the carcass. "You just have to destroy the brain completely. Normal wounds heal, but they can't live without a head." But the victory was short-lived. Outside, the sun was setting, and darkness began to fall again. And from the forest, hundreds of howls erupted. This time, there weren't just 3. It was an entire army. The last siege. Jack gathered all the surviving residents, about 50 people, into the stone church in the center of town. It had the thickest walls and iron doors. "Board up the windows," Jack shouted. "Every man grabs a weapon, even axes and knives will do." 10:15 p.m. Silence reigned outside the church. It was the calm before the storm. Jack climbed the church tower and scanned the area with his sniper rifle. The first shadow appeared from the direction of the cemetery. Then the second, then dozens. They appeared on rooftops, in trees and in the middle of the road. Their eyes glowed in the dark. "Ready the fire," Jack ordered over the radio. The creatures swarmed the church. They began climbing the walls like ants. "Now!" The sheriff and his deputies threw prepared Molotov cocktails from the windows. The church was surrounded by a ring of fire. Dozens of wolves were caught in the flames, screeching wildly as they burned. The smell of scorched meat and fur filled the air, but the Alpha was not among them. "Where is he?" Jack searched with his binoculars. Suddenly, a terrible impact came from beneath the church, from the basement side. The ground shook. "Fools!" Jack yelled. "They aren't breaking the walls. They dug a tunnel from below." Floorboards shattered, and massive claws burst through. Panic erupted. People screamed and scrambled. Jack jumped down from the tower and threw himself into the center of the battle. In his hands, he no longer held a rifle, but a chainsaw. A bloody battle began. the sacred hall of the church turned into a slaughterhouse. Jack sawed off one wolf's arm, ripped open another's stomach, but there were too many. At that moment, the main door was smashed to pieces. There, on the threshold, he stood, Jonas Black, the Alpha. He was 3 meters tall, his body covered in scars, his eyes holding centuries of hatred. He looked at Jack and rasped in a human tongue, "Welcome to my home, Hunter." Hell in the church. The interior of the church had become an arena of the apocalypse. The screams of people, the growls of monsters, and the relentless sound of gunfire merged into one. Jonas Black, the Alpha, took a step forward. A young police officer ran up to him and fired his pistol. The bullets hit the Alpha's chest and ricocheted off as if hitting stone. The Alpha simply waved his hand. The officer flew through the air, smashed against the opposite wall, and slumped down, lifeless. Jack revved the chainsaw. The scream of the engine filled the church. "Come here, you ancient devil," Jack shouted. The Alpha laughed. It was a low, raspy, cold laugh. He lunged at Jack. Jack drove the chainsaw into his shoulder. Grah! Rah! The saw's teeth cut through the Alpha's thick skin and flesh. Black blood sprayed like a geyser. The Alpha roared in pain and kicked Jack in the chest. Jack flew like a ragdoll and landed at the foot of the altar. The chainsaw slipped from his hand, cutting into the floor. Jack tried to get up, but felt his ribs were broken. The Alpha towered over him. "You are strong, Hunter," the Alpha said, the wound on his shoulder healing slowly before their eyes. "But you will die, and then I will add you to my pack." Just then, Sheriff Hawkins, covered in blood, crawled across the floor. He held a bundle of dynamite in his hand. "Jack, run to the tower!" the sheriff screamed and lit the fuse. "Go to hell, you son of a bitch!" Jack ran toward the stairs with all his might. The Alpha turned to the sheriff, but it was too late. Kaboom! A massive explosion blew half the church into the air. The roof collapsed. Hundreds of tons of stone and wood buried the creatures below, the sheriff and the Alpha. Dust and debris covered everything. Jack survived in the highest part of the tower, his ears ringing. Silence below. Only the crackling sound of fire could be heard. The bloody trail and the mountain's heart. An hour before dawn, the dust settled. Jack climbed down through the ruins. The church was gone. Many wolves had been crushed to death under the stones. The surviving humans were hiding safely in the deep part of the basement. But what Jack was looking for, the Alpha's body was missing. At the site of the explosion, there was a massive trail of blood. He was alive. He had crawled away into the forest. If I don't finish him now, he will return. He will heal his wounds and come back even angrier, Jack said. He took his broken revolver and a long steel rebar he found on the ground. He wrapped the tip of the rebar with his torn shirt, dipped it in gasoline, and made a torch. The blood trail led Jack straight to the old mine, the very place where Jonas Black was cursed in 1895. The mouth of the mine gaped black like the maw of a predatory beast. The smell of rotten air and death drifted from within. Jack lit the torch and entered. Bones accumulated over hundreds of years lay scattered everywhere. Human bones. There were strange symbols carved into the walls with claws. This wasn't just a mine. It was the Alpha's throne room. In the deepest part of the mine, by an underground lake, lay the Alpha. Half of him was burned, his left leg crushed, but he was alive. Strange steam swirled around his body. The regeneration process was underway. Seeing Jack, the Alpha raised his head. "Why won't you die?" He wheezed. "Because I was born to kill you," Jack said. Jack looked around. Hanging from the ceiling of the mine were crates of old, very old explosives dynamite. The miners had left them there 100 years ago. The dynamite was sweating, nitro separating out, making it extremely volatile and unstable. One spark was enough. The final blast and a new dawn. The Alpha tried to stand up. His eyes began to show fear, not rage. He understood what Jack was about to do. "You will die too!" the Alpha screamed. "If you detonate that, the whole mountain will collapse on us." "I didn't plan on walking out of here alive," Jack said coldly. Jack threw the burning torch in his hand upward, aiming for the beam where the dynamite hung. The torch spun in the air, flying slowly. The Alpha leaped, trying to catch the torch, but he was too late. The fire touched a drop of nitroglycerin. A second of silence, and then BOOM! The explosion was so powerful that the mountains of Montana shook. The inside of the mine filled with the fire of hell. The mountain peak crumbled and collapsed into the mine. Millions of tons of rock and earth buried Jonas Black, his curse, and the bloody history forever. Epilogue. 3 days passed. The National Guard and the FBI arrived in Silver Peak. In official reports, the event was declared a gas pipeline explosion and bear attacks. Jackson Crow's body was never found under the rubble. The mine was completely sealed. Excavation was impossible. The sheriff's deputy, a young man with his right arm in a cast, stood by the road at the edge of town. He looked into the distance, toward the setting sun. There, on the side of the road, he thought he saw a solitary figure limping away. The figure turned, tipped his hat in farewell, and vanished into the forest. The young man smiled. "The hunt is over, Jack," he whispered. But in the deepest part of the forest, amidst the rocks covered in snow, a small black wolf pup crawled out. Its eyes were not those of a normal wolf. They glowed crimson red. The wolf pup looked at the moon and let out a thin but venomous howl. The horror didn't end. It just took a new form. The end.